A detailed cost analysis for starting a poultry farm. Before you start your poultry farming business, it is important that you have enough details on the cost implication of the project. I have seen many people jump at such projects without having enough details of what it would cost them, and along the line, they end up frustrated when they find out that the startup cost is more than they bargained or prepared for. In order to avoid this type of problem, it is important that you read this article thoroughly and also carry out personal research of your own, so that you can have full details on the costs of setting up your poultry farm. First, you have to decide if you want to set up a small-scale poultry farm or a very large one. This is the first factor that would determine your startup cost. For instance, if you want to set up a backyard poultry farm, you may not need to spend too much money. You will probably just need to build a good cage for the birds, provide a good feeding and water drinking system, and then provide some warmth and security for the birds. But if you want to go into large-scale poultry farming, you would need a whole lot of materials, equipment and tools. Some of the things you would need include a detailed cost analysis for starting poultry or farming business. Land. First, you would need to purchase a good plot of land that would be suitable for farming. Farmlands are usually cheaper than lands in residential areas, so you may be lucky to get a very sizable plot at a very good price. In Nigeria, for instance, you can get a very good plot of farmland with about about $3,500. I am certain that regardless of which country you decide to set up your poultry farm, you should be able to get a good farmland within the price range of $3,500 and $5,000 or even cheaper. 2. Construction costs. The next stage after purchase of land is construction. You would have to build a cage to keep the birds in. There are different types of cages, and you can check one of my previous articles on how to start a poultry farm for the different types of poultry housing. When you have decided on the most suitable one for you, then you can call in experts to give you a quote. But using Nigeria as a case study, then I will say a good poultry housing would cost you nothing less than $2,000, but it still depends on the size of your poultry farm. You may also need to construct some building like stores for keeping equipment and supplies, and maybe a security farmhouse for farm laborers. Chicks. The next thing you would have to spend on is getting chicks to start your farm with. As a beginner, you wouldn't have chicks of your own yet, so you would have to buy from other poultry farmers. The number of chicks you would need depends on the size of your farm and the capacity of the poultry housing you have constructed. The price would also depend on the size of the chicks. Day-old chicks are usually very cheap, and you could get a carton of about chicks for $1 to $2. You may even get it for cheaper, but you have to be careful when handling day-old chicks because they are usually at a higher risk of dying. Poultry equipment. This is yet another thing that is dependent on the size of your poultry farm and the nature of your business. If you want to hatch and sell chicks, for instance, you would have to buy hatchery equipment. If you wanted to process meat for sale, you would also need meat processing equipment. The same thing goes for if you wanted to produce your own poultry feed yourself. So as for cost of equipment, you would really have to sit down and decide on the nature of poultry farming you want to do and find out the type of equipment you would need, but you should have a budget of at least $2,000 for purchasing equipment for a commercial poultry farm. Vaccination. Your birds must be given the necessary medical attention so that they can grow properly and produce efficiently. You have to include the cost of vaccination in your business plan. This cost would also include costs of drugs and payment to the medical consultant that would be called upon to give the birds the required medical attention. Again, you should have a budget of at least $1 for about birds. Feeding. This is like the most important expense you would undertake in this business. Feeding is very important because the growth and productivity of your birds would depend on how well you feed them. There are different types of poultry feeds for different stages in the bird's lives. There is the starter for when they are little chicks, there is the grower for optimal growth and strength, and there is the finisher for when they are getting close to the selling stage. You can budget about $1 for chicks, but if you want to cut costs of feeding, you can consider producing your own poultry feed. Although this may cost you a lot of money for a start, it would save you a lot of money in the long run. Cost of labor. If you are setting up a commercial poultry farm, it is unlikely that you would be capable of handling all the tasks yourself. You may have to employ people to assist you, and you would need to pay them. You can make a budget of at least $1,000 for that, but the actual cost would depend on labor